Hi guys, and welcome to this very quick beginners tutorials. And the reason why I'm making this tutorial is I've been playing Fallout 4 now for about 2 days, and I was wondering how these logic switches work. Also, of course, called logic gates. So before we get started, let's just quickly look at what I've set up here. So what I've done is I've taken a automatic door or a working door or an electric door, doesn't matter what you want to call it. That's there. Then over here we've got a just a normal wall. On this side of the wall we've got this first logic switch and or logic gate, and that's called an AND switch, and I'll explain a little bit later, and a normal switch. And then on this side of the wall we have got another normal switch. We've got another logic gate called a NAND gate, and then I've got two little connectors here that will eventually lead to this light, and I'll show you what the setup is when we get to that. Then just something to mention, I've got a couple of pylons here, 3 on each side, and that's pretty much just to get all the cabling around the wall. So now that you've seen the setup, let's get started, and we'll go through what we're doing as we go along. So let's go into workshop mode, and let's do the simple things first, right? So firstly we want to connect the switches. So I'm going to take a wire over here. I'm going to go to this inner set of pylons. From this pylon I'm going to connect it to the switch. Then I'm going to take this inner pylon that I've just connected again, connect it to the other inner pylon, and connect that to the other switch. There we go. So step 1 is done. We've connected both the switches, and both of the switches have power. You can see the switch has a green light, as well as this side has a green light, which means the switches are working. Now of course the door is not open because nothing is connected to the door power over here, and that is what we are going to use this little logic for. Now the way that the logic button works, or the logic gate works, is it requires, it has an input which is the red, and it's got an output which is the black. From the little drawing on the logic gate you can see that it requires 2 inputs, and it will provide 1 output. Now we all of course already know where the output needs to go, and we're going to connect that to the door. So that part is done. Now at the moment you can see that nothing else works because there's no indicators around either the input or the output, because we need to input 2 things into the red input. And what are we going to input in there? Well, that's very easy. We'll be putting in the switch. Now because this first switch is on this side of the door, I'm not going to be using the pylons because we don't have to get anything around the wall. So I'll simply take the switch and input it into the red input over here. And a funny thing happened, the door just opened, which is correct because at the moment it only has 1 input, right? And of course that input is power on, so it's green. Now what we need to do is we need to take the second switch. I'm going to run this through pylons because we need to get it around the wall. I'm going to use the second set of pylons. I'll take it over there, take the second one, and then from this second pylon run it to the little red switch over there, and the door remains open, which is great. Now the way that we test this is we will now test the door because it should be working. So if I now go here and I flip the switch, the door will close, which is great. Nobody can get in, right? And when I go to the other side of the door and I flip the switch, the door will close and it can't get out. Now why is this great? Why couldn't we have just done this with 1 switch? Well, we have annoying NPCs like, you know, Dogmeat over here, or some other NPCs, or maybe even raiders that can come in and simply flip your door switch when it is closed, and they will try and come in. Now what is very interesting about this, the way that this door is now set up, is if we go on the inside of our house, and we'll say this is the inside because we've got a little lamp over here, if we close it, then of course if any raiders or NPCs, or if Dogmeat, if you could flip the switch, I mean, gets to this door and flips the switch, the door won't open. So that's great, because now nobody can get in, and of course I'll be inside sleeping, and the next morning if I wake up I'll flip the switch and the door will open. Right, step 1 done. Now of course you also notice that we have this other logic gate, and this is simply to add a nice feature. And what this logic gate asks again for, this is the NAND gate. It asks for 2 inputs and it has 1 output. Now of course we know the output is going to go from here to the connector, from the connector to another connector, and that should now power the light if everything works. Now what do we need to put inside of the red inputs? Well, we actually need this switch, and of course we're not going to run it through pylons because it's on this side of the wall, and that goes into the red one. And on this side we need to also take this switch and this one, because we've got to get it to the other side of the wall. We'll run it through pylons, the last set of pylons, and this will go into as the second red connector. Let's just make sure it's in the little red one. There we go, into the red one. And now what should happen is, if I close this door, please note that the light is off at the moment. If I close this door, we are going to bed, locking up, closing the door. We now also have a little night light that's on. Now this is great, especially when you have a building with no windows that lets in no natural light, that the moment that you close the door, the lights of course go on automatically, and this is great in the evening. And of course you don't have to just apply it to a light, you can apply it to anything that you need to use when you are closing a door, I don't know, creating an automatic bunker, some traps maybe, whatever may be the case. Just maybe as a final word, the reason why this works this way is that the NAND gate has a positive and negative condition. So this basically means that if you look at the moment, both the green lights are on both switches, both on this side as well as on this side. Now what the NAND gate says is if one of the 2 switches are turned off, it will actually let power through, which is why the light is off at the moment. When I turn one of these switches off, of course now both conditions are true. In other words, 2 inputs and one of them have no power, it will then let the power through and therefore turn on the light. That's it. And that's as easy as it is to build a nice gate, lockable gate that NPCs can't use to open. You have some privacy and a bit of a night light. There we go guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you found it interesting or useful, please click like.